Meg Heritage, and this is Positivity in Practice. I am here today with a Grand Haven School Board candidate, Cyndi Casemier, one of my dear friends. And I'm excited to learn more about your desire to run for school board this year.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate your time here.
Yeah. So I've known Cyndi for years and years and years. She has been a absolutely huge, wonderful support to my women-owned business, and I loved supporting your downtown business.
You did a lot.
Yeah, so Cyndi has a multifaceted life, and I don't think you'll ever really retire.
No, that'd be boring.
Yeah, so I learned one of these beautiful things from you that I don't think I would have learned in any other way when you came to Grand Haven Rotary and you gave us all a little piece of clay. Do you remember this?
Oh, I do.
So Cyndi is a very talented, do I say potter? Artist?
Ceramic artist.
Ceramic artist, okay. I always thought in my younger years, like how ridiculous that someone would pay $60 or $100 or, I guess sometimes $300 for a bowl. And then I tried to make one. And it didn't turn out very well.
So that day, it was so hilarious. Pat McGinnis invited me to talk at Rotary. And he came up to me afterwards. He goes, I knew you would do something that no one was prepared for. And I was like, yeah. I said, I wanted to put clay in everybody's hands.
It was fantastic. It was not only fantastic because I just think that tactile, right? Like as a former teacher, we learn kinesthetically, we learn auditorily, we learn in so many different ways, and to have it in your hands while you were talking about what you were capable of doing and then seeing what I was like woefully not capable of doing, it was a really neat way to teach, I thought.
Yeah, it's fun. And the nice thing about clay is you just mush it back up again and do it over.
Yeah, I would be doing it over for a really long time.
It's okay, you get better every time.
Yes, just like that. So Cyndi had a very successful business called C2C Gallery on downtown Washington, not far from where the Blue West Properties offices are, and then decided to close brick and mortar, bring that in-house, but still is very active in the art scene.
Yes.
And now you've decided to throw your name in the hat in the name. No.
Name in the ring.
Hat in the ring.
Yeah.
Yes. For Grand Haven School Board. I wanted to start with just a little bit of an understanding because I asked a few people, well, what does their school board do? And no one could really answer it. And I wasn't sure that I was 100% clear, even having been a teacher and with a graduate degree in education. So for our listeners, the school board's job, according to the Michigan School Board Association, is to goal set, to establish policy. They designate and evaluate the superintendent and hire. They also evaluate the performance of the superintendent. They budget. They approve recommended curriculum. They also adopt policies governing salaries and salary schedules, terms and conditions, so staffing and appraisal. And they also determine school facility needs.
Correct.
It's a big job.
It is a big job. It is. And they're broken up into committees. So if you're elected on a board, I served on a board in Vermont for 8 years.
Okay.
And I was on the executive committee. I served on the literacy. I served on the teachers' negotiations contractual committee. So I saw a lot of different aspects. So everything you read is exactly what we do. But when you're a board member, you serve on separate subcommittees, and you become an expert in that area.
Okay.
And then those committees report back to the board so that then the board can make a good decision about whatever the topic is.
Okay. What subcommittees were you on and what were your favorites? Because this is really broad.
It is broad.
Okay.
And so I raised 6 children. 6 kids have 6 different learning styles.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. And sometimes the kids at the upper end get ignored. Sometimes the kids at the lower end get ignored for a variety of reasons. So it's very hard to decide what area are you going to focus on for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We decided at one point, the board in Vermont, that we wanted to make sure that all children could read, interpret, and then use that information. So we decided literacy was a focus.
Okay.
And there was a subcommittee of that. So I worked on that. We restructured the entire literacy program for that school district. And it was interesting. There was pushback, but at the end, everyone saw that every single child in that school system was a better reader at the end of looking at it over 2 years. It was amazing. And then I was on the teachers' contractual board, or committee, excuse me. And it was long nights, and it was a lot of conversations. And we had teachers on one aisle on side of the table, and we had board members on the other side, and we had citizens sitting on this committee.
Okay.
And luckily, everyone came to the table respectful, and we could talk. And we talked about what the wants were, and we talked about what we could afford. And we have to be respectful of what the community will pay for.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very interesting. And we spent months working to write that new contract. And so in a strange way, that was my favorite committee. And I don't know why, if it's because I'm also a numbers person.
Right.
And so for me, I really did like looking at that and learning at how all of those contracts are structured and all the tiers and the steps and just all that information. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in district to district. That's so different. I remember when I was looking for my first teaching job, I mean, it's public knowledge where you start as a year one teacher. And I want to go back to that because there is some information that I learned from our new superintendent, Kristen, that I thought was just mind boggling. But I'll jump back into the finance piece because Cyndi, you're really interesting in that you're an artist, but you're also high math. And I've sold houses with you and done all of these things with you where I'm like, oh, wow, that's really interesting, right? That you use both sides of your brain very, very well, and you switch from one to the other very, very well. So, but why now? Why jump back into this now?
I've wanted to do this ever since I moved back to Grand Haven. So I was born in Grand Haven. I'm a fourth generation retailer in Grand Haven. And I raised my kids in Vermont, though. And when I came back, I was a ceramic artist. But how am I going to make enough pots to pay my mortgage? It's impossible. I have a business degree, so I opened the gallery. Well, when you own a retail store, what happens is it consumes you. You work 7 days a week. I didn't have time to be a good board member. Well, now I have the time. I don't have the brick and mortar. I've shrunk my business down to being only my clay. So I can now focus and give the schools the time that they deserve.
I love that. And I think that I prejudged some of the people who were sitting on the school board because I'm a parent. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, there's no way, given, the vintage of this human, that they have kids that are currently in the school district. And I actually apologized after listening to one of the school board members because 100% he was more than qualified to sit inside of that space because of the longevity that he'd had and the fact that he had raised children inside of the school district and the degrees and the experience and all of those things. So I see a lot of value in that. And one of the reasons that I have never, thrown my hat in the ring is because I know that right now, given my, we all, I think, speak in terms of Taylor Swift, my momming so hard era, mm-hmm. I'm not sure that I would be able to be at all of those meetings and do all of those things. So, I mean, first of all, thank you. Yeah, in this world, I feel like anytime you draw attention, you immediately draw attack. And I appreciate that you're willing to put your heart center skills, mindset, all of that out there in order to benefit our kids because they're our future and there's nothing more important.
Definitely. There is nothing more important than educating our kids. They have to be raised so that they can be successful, productive humans when they're adults.
Yeah, we're all in big trouble. Who's going to take care of us?
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to know a couple of things, and I wrote myself some notes here. What is your vision for the school district, and how do you feel like it it will be achieved, or what will your part in achieving it be?
Well, first of all, I mean, you talked about what is the job of a board member. And I personally, and this is my opinion only, you don't go onto a board with an agenda.
Mm.
The idea is that you're going to go onto a board and be a good listener, and then use all your previous skills and knowledge to bring to the table after you've listened to what the issues are and what the problems are, what the good things are, and then how do you help move that board forward and basically help the superintendent, help the principal, the teachers do their jobs. So, I believe that we're supposed to support the superintendent, basically,
Right.
and we are not supposed to micromanage the individual buildings. You also touched on our new superintendent.
Yeah.
She's doing this great job. She's out and about. She's doing she's called them Coffee and Connect. And she is sitting down, welcoming everyone and saying, what are your concerns? What are your thoughts? What are your worries? What are we doing well? What
Yeah.
can we do better? And she's listening and she's writing notes, and she has someone also at the table with her who is writing notes. So together, hopefully they've heard most of the comments.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed about her is that she seems to have a all-encompassing understanding that it is. Well, let me just give you a for instance. So instead of just looking at, say, the facilities that we have right now that we know are archaic and really need help, and I have some semblance of understanding that, there was obviously embezzlement, and we've been through multiple superintendents, and we've got a lot of churn inside of that space, but also we have a new guard. There are new people that have been
Mhm.
put in place, and at some point we have to go back to benefiting our kids, and that means that we have to not only look at what was right, but certainly be looking forward to
Right.
where we're going. One of the pushbacks that I've seen in that is, well, my kids are through school, it's not really any of my business. And as a
Mm.
real estate broker, I find that incredibly interesting, because if you are a property owner,
Mhm.
then you should care about your school district and your thriving school district. I mean, you should care about children just because you should be a good human, like do better,
Right.
but you should care about the school district because school districts, good schools drive home values. And I am concerned about that. And then on the other side, I am also concerned. In one of my meetings with Kristen, I learned that, and I'm not going to say the exact number because I don't recall it, but there are more than 140 teachers retiring in Grand Haven Public Schools. The average new teacher, according to McDonald at the district, makes less than $60,000 a year.
Right.
Our rents are somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,600 a month, and that's a nice one bedroom. And so I'm deeply concerned about affordable housing and how we get these great teachers to come into West Michigan and want to teach in our school districts when it's not necessarily affordable to live here.
Right.
So super cool that I didn't bring that up to her. She already knew that, and she understood what was going to be needed. And so I feel like I can lean in on the real estate side of that and see what's possible, of course. And I understand that right now, the sinking bond or sinking
Seeking fun.
fund passed,
Mhm.
which is fantastic. What a terrible name for anything.
Right.
Which will allow some construction to happen on our
Correct.
buildings.
Right. Some rehabbing
But we obviously have this really deep need.
we do.
Yeah. So
You know what's also interesting about all of that?
yeah.
I was looking at some stats also, and we have the lowest millage of any district in on the lakeshore, all the way over to Grand Rapids, and it was startling the difference. And when our current bond or millage basically evaporates the end of this year, I believe, we'll only have that sinking fund, which is 0.74.
Right.
If you looked at Jenison Schools or Allendale, they're at
West
like
Ottawa.
7, West Ottawa. So what will our community pay for to educate our children?
Right.
That's really the question. And I think we need to do a better job. And I think Kristen knows this too, our new superintendent, that she needs to talk and we need to do a better job of communicating to the public. So if you spend this much, this is what you receive. If you spend X amount of dollars, this is what you'll receive. I mean, I do think that maybe we need to be really black and white, and many times I don't think people understand what their tax dollars go towards.
No, I don't think they do either. And I've heard people say, well, we should get rid of all of these, short-term rentals and the non-homestead property taxes and people who are coming here and buying vacation houses on the lake. And my first question is, how are you going to recoup the 30%-ish more that they're paying in non-homestead taxes? So while I'm all for ideas, I don't want ideas where the bottom drops out because we're doing one thing that we feel is good and it actually, in the end makes it worse.
Right.
That's why I love your high math. And the creativity. I am not high math. I am like, no, thank you to high math, but I can statistically look at it and recognize that if I were someone making, let's say, $58,000 a year, and I'm spending $12,000 or more than that, $15,000 in rent, and then perhaps I have some school debt, and it's costing the average single human in the United States of America $150 a week to eat.
Right, at minimum.
Right, yep. And I've got, obviously a car and insurance and all of these other things. It's difficult to make that desirable.
Yeah, it doesn't work in the budget.
No, it doesn't. And I like her clean sweep of let's start from the baseline and really figure out what the community needs. And it sounds like
Right.
you're 100% on board for that.
Definitely. And Vermont has much smaller towns.
Yeah.
But one of the things I loved about it, and I know it's not possible here, but as a board, we had to sit in front of our town. We had town meeting days. And we physically sat in the school auditorium or the largest facility that they had, and we had to answer questions about what was on that line and why was it. And what it did, though, is it made us accountable. We made sure every single board member could answer the question on every single line item of the budget and why it was at that dollar amount. And maybe if all of us could understand that and be able to explain it, it would help the community then, because all of the people we know, we would be talking to them, and more people would understand what it takes to educate our children.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, our budgets always passed.
Yeah.
And they supported it, and their taxes are double what we pay here.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, compared to some places in the United States, this is an affordable place to live for sure.
My children would love to live here.
Yeah, I know. I know where your kids live. I think too, what is interesting to me is, having been a teacher, I taught in inner city Las Vegas, and then I taught alternative ed, got a graduate degree, and then went right into real estate. A confused prospect never buys is the first rule of sales. So I think that's what was happening in the lack of clarity. And one of the things that I believe Grand Haven Public Schools did really well is hired this communications director. So with what you just said, if you had transparency, from the board, and people can show up at board meetings. That's the thing that's always
Right.
amazing to me is there's a lot of squawk on social media. But it's not like everybody on the board sees all of that. It's better to, take your concerns directly to the board. I was at the League of Women Voters. That's what it's called, right?
Yes.
A couple years ago. And both the Spring Lake candidates and the Grand Haven candidates sat in front of, anybody who wanted to come and ask them questions. I saw Spring Lake was standing room only. Every single candidate was present. And Grand Haven Public Schools, 2 already sitting board members
Mhm.
were the only people who showed up.
Wow.
Right. So that's not you, right?
No.
If you're invited.
Right. I attend.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And why didn't they show up? I mean, that was, why wouldn't you answer questions? Why wouldn't you let people get to know who you are?
Yeah, well, no one from Ottawa Impact came. No one that was running inside of that space. I don't know why. I don't know. I did hear at one point, and I certainly, this is just hearsay, but that they felt that the questions would not be impartial. My response to that was, do you think when you are sitting on a school board and a parent shows up or a community member shows up, that you will only be questioned on things that you want to answer? Right?
Right.
It's sort of like an interview. And so that was disappointing to me, to be in a position where it was like, well, hire me and you'll see.
Right. It doesn't work that way.
I hope not, and it
Yeah.
didn't.
Right. Right.
It didn't work that way. So I am hoping that we see, you said there are 8 candidates, 3 seats.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If
I
I,
mean, and I have been looking, trying to listen and see what I can find out about the other people running. And
yeah.
so far, I haven't heard a whole lot. So it's curious. And the thing is, I don't know if you know this. If you attend a school board meeting, there's a policy in place that if, as a resident, you sign your name on the paper, you
Mhm.
get your 3 minutes to talk, and you can ask a question. You can say, "I'm concerned about this. You know, would you respond to me?" So the board doesn't respond point blank at that meeting because that's not fair. And,
Mhm.
because they have no idea what someone's going to bring up. But they do have a policy that by the end of the next business day, the person who came to the board meeting will be called or emailed, and they will have a response
Okay.
and they can have a conversation. So I thought that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's listening, that's really addressing and taking their concerns seriously.
I think so too. That's the difference between reaction and response.
Yes.
Right. I want to make sure I get through the
Yeah.
questions that, okay. So addressing the budget constraints while maintaining the quality of education. We talked sort of a little bit about that. Is there anything else you want to say in that space? The budget constraints are obviously mostly, in my understanding, about facilities.
Right.
So the rejudging of the plan and being really clear, or I guess scrapping almost is what I've heard, and going back to the baseline, with these September, I think it's 23rd, 25th, and then 25th again. Like she's made herself available more than I've ever seen anybody.
Right. And if anybody wants to attend any of these meetings, they're, what are they being called? There's another gathering. It's a 2-hour meeting. But if you go to Facebook and to the Friends of GHAP, Grand Haven Area Public Schools,
Yeah.
they're posting when each of those are taking place. There's daytime, there's evening.
And I
And
have a screenshot of it, so I'll make sure that I put it wherever this lands,
okay.
too, in my social media. But I definitely think that, it's important. I wish that some of those, like, I want to meet the candidates, right?
Yes,
So
of
I'm
course.
hoping that the women's league, comes forward, or we see On Track have kind of bios so that we can understand more about who we're voting for.
And On Track is definitely creating another mailing to do that. The MEA created a mailing. They're endorsing and giving information. Who else is doing it? The Grand Haven Tribune is.
Okay.
Um, and at the Unicorn, Tuesday night, they are hosting I think it's female candidates,
Okay.
and of course I'll be there. But
Right.
everyone, and so not just school board, but all of the female candidates will be at the Unicorn, and you can ask questions, and there'll be a panel.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Very cool. What is your stance? Here's a hot button item, on school safety.
You know, as I've been listening to concerns and attending different meetings and then talking to people, it's been interesting. So, have you noticed that when you go to any of our schools, there is now large letters and numbers on all exterior doors?
Mhm.
So that allows public safety, police, the administration can say, "Come to this door."
Right.
The other thing that I thought is interesting, and it makes me sad, but I've had other people say, no, 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 our students are so happy that they know that security and our safety is being handled.
Right.
and that we can go to school and not worry about it. We can do our job and just learn. That, for instance, all of the classroom doors are locked,
Mhm.
and the teachers don't have to fumble with their keys if there's an emergency. They're just locked.
Mhm.
So you can only enter the room if you knock on the door and if you're known. And the other thing is that you can only come into the building through one doorway. You have to give an ID, and then you get a name tag. And there are safety officers in the school
Yeah.
buildings. And if you aren't recognized and if you don't have a name tag on, they ask you, what you're doing. And, so there's a number of things in place that, our children's safety is definitely, a concern, and they're addressing it.
Yeah.
I did hear last night, I'm going to talk to Kristen about it, that one of the juniors in the high school said, yeah, they're doing all of these things. But guess what, Mom? There's a window of time that anybody can walk in our front doors, because at the high school, all of the front doors are open for all of those students to come in. And they're unlocked for, say, I don't know, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And nobody is there really truly looking to see if those kids have lanyards with their badges or tags, or if they're known. So that would be the opportunity. And how do we address that? I don't know. Do we have metal detectors? Do we, I do know, I spoke with the principal at the high school, and she said that they have a safety officer who is doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
So, I think we're working towards it, and we are not ignoring it. That's for certain.
No, and I mean, unfortunately, my own kids, like, they know there's a potential threat. So I honor them also knowing that there's protections
Right.
put in place for the potential of that threat. And I think just yesterday, we had an abundance of caution email sent out at White Pines. All of these things seem to be being taken very, very seriously.
Right.
And I certainly honor that as a parent. And I, have not been able to get like access into offices like we used to in the past.
Right.
I also came out of Clark County School District, which was one of the largest school districts in the nation, where long, long ago we had security in every single hallway.
Mhm.
And I mean, I was teaching there. I don't even know how long ago. I dare not say 20 years or something like
You're
that.
not that old.
Well, it feels like it was a million years ago, but they were taking those kinds of precautions then, that now we're just starting to see here, because I think we thought it could never be us, and then we see
Right.
things like Oxford, and we know that it absolutely can be.
Yeah. West Michigan has always felt like in a protected bubble.
Yeah. And I know this is something that's really close to your heart. So the mental health, space, and how we honor that. And I think, both of our teachers and our students, in a time when it's just harder. It
Yeah.
feels harder. It's harder to parent. It's harder to be a kid. It's harder to be a teacher. It's harder to be an administrator. And I think it's harder to be on the school board.
Yeah. It is. They one of the things our district is doing that I don't believe other districts are doing is we have a social worker in every building, and it's huge. And they've taken a lot of time in training our teachers, support staff, with regard to how to see behaviors that could lead to a mental problem with a student and how to address it. I've heard stories that there's a lot of students coming to school now because they were 3 or 4 when the pandemic happened, and they didn't learn how to behave in school. They didn't learn, how to line up. They didn't learn. So there's all of these kids that they've had to re-educate just to get ready to learn. And so the teachers, I give them so much credit because they've had to be patient. They've had to step back from their curriculum and go, okay, wait a second. I've got to get this kid ready so that he can be open to hearing what we're talking about.
Right.
And I can't imagine doing their jobs.
Mm-mm.
I can't imagine it. And the nice thing also is that we have several counseling groups that work hand in hand with our schools, like Mosaic Counseling.
Oh yeah, I'll always raise my paddle for Mosaic.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
And if anybody wants to support them, they have a fashion show coming up in
November.
November.
Yes.
Yeah, Blue West has already sponsored it. 100%. Get there, raise your paddle. I think it's $1,000 pays for counseling for a student for the entire year.
Yeah.
And they'll take $5,
Right. They will.
5,000, whatever you've got,
Yep.
because I don't believe that we have the resources or the funding internally to GHAPS to pay for that. And I'm glad that they're coming forward in that space. So thank you for mentioning that.
Well, and I heard an amazing story again last night, that, for instance, a parent was very concerned about their 13-year-old daughter,
Mhm.
and they called several different counseling uh, businesses in the area, and it was like, well, we could see them in 6 weeks. It's like, no, we have a problem right now. And she heard of Mosaic, called Mosaic. It's like, we can see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so somehow Mosaic is running their agency in a different model, and they're able to find enough counselors, or I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it,
Yeah. They've got hundreds and hundreds of counselors who have signed up to be in that space.
which is
And
amazing.
yeah, and there's a huge deficit.
There is.
And I don't think that everybody gets that, the school counseling degree that I could have chosen. I chose the administrative leadership path, but had a hard time deciding between being in the school counseling path versus the administration. And that is a human who helped us like get into college and looked at
Right.
transcripts and helped to coach maybe a life plan for the next 4 or 5 years, who may or may not have all of the training that like QPR training, suicide prevention, and all of these things that, are happening. Not to mention the fact that, we had a lot of people who were at home that experienced trauma during COVID and all kinds of other things that are, not at the forefront of our mind. So I'm
Right.
glad that you're thinking about that and leaning into that, because if you're not okay here, you're not going to be okay
Oh, no kidding. And
doing
especially,
algebra.
and if they're not being fed, I
Right.
mean, and we have, another wonderful nonprofit that helps with that in the area. But, and I was amazed. I started, I've been trying to do my homework. And if you go to our website for our school system, there's amazing resources and partnerships that are right there on the website that people can get access to, and they can get help.
Right.
And I had no idea.
Yeah, there are tons and tons of resources in Northwest Ottawa County, especially.
Yeah.
We're really blessed to have all of that. It's the education so that people know where to get those resources.
Right.
I think that sometimes we, lack a little bit in that. I would like to know what role you think parents have in the decision making processes inside of, Grand Haven Public Schools.
Well, you and I are on the same page with this, like 100%. Learning begins at home.
Right.
Begins the day that they're born. The parent, that's their primary job, is to, teach your child every step of the way. So, in order to keep that going, parents have to participate. They have to show up. They've got to walk in the building. They've got to go to teacher conferences. They need to go to events. They need to ask questions. And then they have to go home and think about what they believe and what their morals and ethics are, and whether it aligns with them or not, and then go back and have a conversation. And believe it or not, I believe that all of our teachers are phenomenal teachers at Grand Haven. I've been asking that question of people, and they're like, "Oh, I never had a bad teacher."
Mhm.
So I think if people can come in and ask good questions and not be attacking,
Right.
it works out, and people get heard, and they're like going, "Oh, I never thought of that. Let me think about this, and let me get back to you." Because many times people are just trying to do the best they can, and we're human. You
Yep.
miss an idea, because maybe it never crossed your path. So parents are key. They have to be involved. Um, Gosh, I don't know what else can I say about that.
Well, I heard Kristen say this thing, and I hope she goes someplace with it. I think she intends to, but on Monday at Rotary, there was a presentation, and she said something along the lines of, and I'm going to muddle it, unfortunately, but if everyone did one thing,
Yes.
if every individual did one thing, right?
Mhm.
Whether that's, time, talent, or treasure, what that looks like. There have been times where I didn't have any money. And so, certainly when I was an educator, I think I made under $30,000 when I had my first teaching job in Vegas. I
Mm.
distinctly remember spending all my money on certs, and sleeping on a mattress because that was more important to me than buying a bed. But I think that if we could get to a point where we realize everybody can do one thing, right? Like I can sponsor Bucks Blasters or kids sports teams or that kind of thing. Somebody else may be able to make a meal for, teachers during the time when they're doing conferences, and kind of get a list together so that we could get community in action,
Right.
rather than, being in this, either it's their problem and I pay taxes, so I shouldn't have to deal with that, which was a mentality that I heard from parents, right?
Sure. They're busy.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do when I have an alternative ed student who is reading at a sixth grade level and I taught 9 through 12.
Right.
So clearly, like somebody missed something
Yep.
along the line,
Somewhere. Yep.
teacher, parent, everyone,
Hmm.
right? But I do believe that um, the more voices that we have in a collaborative space instead of a criticize, condemn, complain space,
Hmm.
the more progression that we get. And I know that's how you work. Like, I love the way that you will go down multiple avenues. Even when we were talking about, homes and life plans and, selling your business or moving your business, sorry, selling your building, all of those things. I think that will be a huge benefit in the way that you work for our community, for our kids, for our teachers. There's no rigidity in you.
Try not to be. And the one thing, I raised my kids with, if they had a complaint, I was always saying, and I've said this to other people in times, when they would come in my store and they would be complaining about something, I'd listen to them and I'd say, I can tell this is a big concern of yours. I said, but here's the thing. Then you need to have an answer of how to resolve it. And then you need to participate to help solve the problem.
Right.
And so the more people that can decide that it's a concern and get involved, that's how we build our community. And our public schools are a reflection of our community.
Yeah.
I mean, there are schools, so let's make them ours.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, we have a
agree.
great community.
We do. We have a fantastic community and we have a lot of, I think, misinformation about Lakeshore is the one that, I just hear stuff where they're like, well, they're sitting on a gold mine there. Like just knowing that when you having been in residential, construction, when you take down a house, it's, 8 grand. And how much money it would take just to like remove that building and then figure out what we're gonna do. And having been in it and felt the like physical discomfort of being in a meeting in what I think used to be the pool that is
I
now like
remember that room.
an auxiliary gym.
Right.
I mean, I was in there for 25 minutes and I wanted out so
Yeah.
bad. And
Yeah.
I'm a little claustrophobic, but I think if we can get to that point of clarity, then we'll get to a better space of collaboration in general. And I say the same thing to my team at Blue West. Am I listening right now, or are we looking? Or am I solving? Am I helping
Mm.
you to solve? Right? Do you have some solutions? Why don't you think about it a little bit more and come back with some ideas? I and I don't know that we've seen a ton of that. At least I haven't seen it. But I
Right.
hope that as we see these new candidates and as you, bring yourself forward, I know that maybe I shouldn't say this. Are you a generally middle of the road person? Where do you think you stand in the humanity space?
Definitely, I'm middle of the road.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, raising 6 kids, you have to be middle of the road because they all have different personality types. And
Right.
as a business owner, we had a rule in my gallery that everyone was treated this exact same way, no matter who you were in town. You walked in the door, you got the exact same service. And my employees knew that if they didn't do that, I would let them go with no second chance because our job was to educate them about art, talk to them, be friendly, be helpful. And I didn't care what walk of life you were from. And so the same thing needs to happen in our schools. The same thing happens with me serving on a board is that we're going to look at all of the information and try to make the best decision that we can. And, one of the things that I was just thinking about this whole Lakeshore Middle School.
Yeah.
Um, Interestingly for me, my mom was an architect. So
Mhm.
I grew up with, her building things and drawing things and considering things. And I've had people saying, well, in Europe, they don't tear buildings down. That's a brick building. Why can't they retrofit it? Why can't they, and with my accounting background and financial services background and small business background, I think I know how to juggle money really well.
Mhm.
In that, when you're a small business, you learn how to do a lot with little.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think I've got a lot of different skill sets that I can sit and listen and then ask good questions, and we can try to make a really good decision with information and feedback from the community for that property.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think this new communications director and just having more open conversation prior to when people are actually voting, right?
Correct.
Like that felt fast, I think, for a lot of
Yes.
people. Not myself, but with a construction background, like it was like, yeah, I mean, it's going to cost an incredible amount of money because you haven't paid money for an incredible amount of time to lean into
Right.
these resources, right? You've got
Right.
deferred maintenance everywhere. My kids have been in one, two, three, four buildings at this point.
Mm.
And I've seen that in every building that, they've been in.
Yeah, I think our buildings are have an average 60 years.
Yeah, I saw that and I was just like, "Oh my goodness gracious." And then when they had the sinking fund out there, and there was something about construction for construction. Somebody was like, "Well, they're just trying to sneak it in there that they're trying to." I'm like, "Well, you wouldn't give them a new building. Could you help them with the funds to be able to, have maintenance on a ramp for somebody with a disability or
Right.
a leaking window or
Right.
a leaking roof? Could you give them something there so
Right.
that they can continue to, duct tape this thing together until we can get a plan that
That works for
passes?"
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered that is important for people to know about you as they go
Mm.
into vote in how many weeks? It's not far,
Yeah, I
right?
think we're down to 50 days, 45 days,
Okay.
something like that. Um, I've served on a lot of boards, and I love it. I do. As I've said before, the job of a board member is not to come with an agenda. It's not to come and walk in the door and say, "I want this done."
Mhm.
Our job is to listen to an executive director, listen to the team, listen to the superintendent, and hear what the issues are, ask good questions, ask for more feedback, get more information, do some more studying, and then, talk with the superintendent and make a new policy to move forward.
Mhm.
And then let her do her job and have enough time frame so that we can see if there's really truly the outcomes we wanted.
Yeah. Well, and we'll see as, she's offered all of these different times for people to show up
Yeah.
and be heard.
And and she's friendly. Come out,
Very,
talk to her.
yeah, very, very friendly, very just open. Does not there's nothing condescending about her or
No.
absolute about
Nope.
her. And I think your personalities, are similar in that space. Like tell me why and help me see it as a parent, as a school board member, as a person who's lived here your whole life or most of your life, and then
Yeah.
been come back,
Right.
right? Went
Yeah, but sh
away and made the decision that this is really where you want to be
right.
and where you want to serve.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess the other thing that I've learned in the last few weeks, I've talked to every board member. We have a great board right now. They
Oh, that's
don't
good.
all come from the same walk of life,
Yeah.
which you don't want on a school board. We want every type of person represented. And that board does have that. And that's a good thing,
Right.
but we need to have people on the board who are willing to listen and work.
Yeah. I guess we'll see.
I know we will.
Well, I'm super grateful for your time today. And it's our hope and intention that we can do a meet and greet for you. So I'll make sure that we add that behind this and, people can come out and ask you questions. I know you're accessible on Facebook,
Right.
right? How would someone get a hold of you if they had a question after listening to this and wanted an answer?
You can go to an email. If you can email me, as Megan has said, I'm pretty good with technology.
Yes.
So You can message me on any of the social media sites under my name. I do have one set up that's Cyndi, CYNDI, the numeral 4, GHAPS. So that's my moniker for Facebook and Instagram. And if you use that same thing and put at gmail.com, you can email me.
Oh, cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you. I'm so grateful that you're doing this.
Oh, and I appreciate you. You're awesome.